Dr. Shannon, it's a pleasure to have you here today for the Interspecies movement by Atria University. You have spent your last decade traveling multiple countries and 4 continents to spread awareness about sustainability and conservation. And before we delve deeper into your topic, I just wanted to know about your journey and what got you motivated to get into a subject like this.
So I've been a scientist for over 20 years. And as you said, I've been able to travel. I've been fortunate to travel to many different countries and work in many countries. And, you know, when I came to India the first time, I was completely blown away by the beautiful landscape of this country and also by the incredible knowledge and intelligence of the people of this country. And so it became a very natural fit for me to take my science, because I knew anyone who's an academic is a lifelong learner, and I'm very passionate about my own learning, and I knew I could learn a lot here from the people and from the land as well. And it was really my experiences learning from both over the past almost 10 years now that really drove me to this realization that from the confines of academia, I was somewhat limited in my ability to not only reach people from different sectors, not only from a communication standpoint, but also from, more importantly, from a listening standpoint. I felt like I didn't understand what people, you know, from banking or people who are farmers in one part of the country, or even governments of different parts of the country felt about some of these issues that I cared about, like biodiversity. And so that's where my path really started to change to how do we create a science and technology-based society, a knowledge-based society, which is even in the constitution of this country, right? Importance of knowledge and science. How do we create that kind of society that also is equipped to utilize this to help themselves, their land, their environment, their communities, and their own livelihoods, right? So that's really where this idea comes from, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, and learning how to do with many other people at the same time. It's a collective action, so.
Yeah. So ma'am, we obviously know about your Eco network, and I've actually been listening to some of your podcasts as well, and I must say it's really insightful and refreshing to hear the podcast. I'm sure our viewers would love to know what's the current state with the Eco network, what are your goals, and what's the vision?
Thank you very much, first of all, for listening to the podcast. We have amazing people in our network, so we're just highlighting a few, and that's what it is. We're a group of people. We are a network, we are a community, and the goals of our network are first of all, to try to establish a bit more trust between different sectors of society. That's something that we lack across the world and also here in India. So try to build trust so that people trust each other enough to listen to each other and to share ideas with each other. And then also to share each other's value systems, right? We all value the things around us in our own way, from our own perspective. And so in order to create a common purpose and a common goal that can utilize science and technology, you also have to share the values. And so that's really what we do. So the reason we're called the Eco Network, an echo is something that you yell and it comes back to you. And we feel that we are the reflected voice, the reflected scientific voice of society. We listen to communities. We listen directly to community members through various channels. We also listen indirectly through organizations that represent those communities. And we use that listening, and we use a lot of actually scientific analytical tools to assess the viewpoints and try to find points of commonality that we can help to drive forward and scale and increase the scope of across this country. There's tons of people. I think the important thing I've learned from the network is that there's tons of people in this country who are already doing amazing things to try to make this country better, try to make it more sustainable, more resilient. And if our network can just help them to do their job better, help them to raise their collective voice with others doing the same thing. That's really what our goal is.
I was actually going through the Eco Network website, and I may be wrong here, but I saw a lot of similarities between the Eco Network and the interspecies movement in terms of philosophy and goals. Do you think there can be a possible collaboration here, and if yes, what should be the initial steps here?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about values before, and I think that one of the ideas of putting financial aspects on this sort of conservation interspecies understanding is because, as I just heard in one of the panel sessions, money is what runs this world right now. It is generally how we value things. We value things because we put a monetary value, or rupees or a dollar or whatever currency we're using on it. So that is what drives often our understanding. That is difficult to do for things that are invaluable, right? I mean, you can price water until you don't have any, and then it's invaluable, right? So I do find that these kind of conversations, right, about how do we properly value things around us, how do we understand the values and the needs of our community, which really everybody just wants to live their lives, right? They want to live their lives in a sustainable manner. They want to have their children have a sustainable livelihoods. They want them to have a successful life, right? So given that, right, how do we marry that with the very real needs we have for preserving biodiversity, where we don't often put a monetary value, except when it's like something that we use. For example, if we collect firewood and use it, then it has a value. But trees have a value way beyond that, right? As carbon fixers, as groundwater retainers, and lots of other fashions. So that's the way we have to have these conversations. So there's where this interspecies movement, I think, is a really interesting concept to drive it forward. And whether or not it is realized in India exactly as it's discussed right now, I do think that it's important. And as a scientist, I feel very strongly about this. New ideas are good to discuss. It's good to bring in new insights. Even if you disagree with them, that's also important. Why do you disagree? What is it that you disagree with? Because this drives the conversation forward. And clearly, we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. I'm not doing enough as a scientist. None of us are doing enough. So clearly we need to do things differently and better. And so these ideas, these conversations need to happen. So that's why I'm very, very happy to be here.
So coming back to the topic of discussion here today, the Interspecies Conclave, which talks about creating a digital twin for every creature and having a value added to it, which can lead to the conservation of that creature. And you have worked with a lot of local communities and tribal communities before. My question is, do you think making these communities understand a concept like interspecies can be a challenge or can be a hurdle?
I think you answered it earlier. I think the way you start is not by explaining, but by listening. I think that communities do value their natural resources. I think especially communities that are embedded in these ecosystems have not only an inherent but an extrinsic understanding of the importance of these ecosystems. And I think we need to start by listening to that, understanding the valuation that they already have, the cultural history, the language that they use, right? I mean, they have words for things that don't even translate to English very well, right? So how do you understand those concepts? I think that is absolutely the first step, is to gather this understanding, gather this data, which is also, qualitative as well as quantitative, and then step back and say, okay, this is what we have, this is the landscape. Now, how do we start thinking about this kind of this sort of financial technological strategy that the interspecies money would provide, and have it embedded within the context of what is already very much existing in this country and is very powerful.
Ma'am, for the last question here today, you have spent the last decade with conservation, and you have spent the last decade here in India as well. I wanted to ask, how do you envision the coming decade, the coming 10 years, in context of not only conservation but about the awareness about conservation and biodiversity to the rest of the public?
Yeah, I would like to change the narrative. I think the narrative right now that a lot of us are getting, particularly our youth, is about how bad everything is, how bad the climate is. And there is. I mean, there is a crisis. I mean, honestly, here in India, we know it very well. Yeah. We know how scary it is, right? But I would like to change the narrative into one of opportunity, right? We also have a tremendous opportunity to change for the better, right? To change how we consume things on this planet in a much more sustainable manner, to change how we consume so that it's more equitable, so that we're not only sustaining ourselves, but we're sustaining those who currently can't sustain themselves because they don't have enough. How do we do this? And that's exciting. I mean, as a scientist and as an academic, what an exciting time it is, because we can really think of completely new ways of living on this planet. And so I would like to very much change that narrative to one of positivity. You know, when we think about space, right, you're hearing the moon mission right now that India is so proud of, and justifiably so, right? That's exciting because it's exploring, but that's exactly what we have to do here. We have an Earth mission, right, that people talk about, but absolutely, we have an India mission. How do we get 1.4 billion people to live together in 17% of the world's biodiversity hotspots together, successfully? God, what a challenge and what an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. That was great having a conversation with you. It was really insightful.
Thank you very much, Sam. Thanks.